Good evening from Des Moines, Iowa. I'm here with Jennifer Jacobs of the Des Moines Register, and we're in the newsroom because tomorrow, here in Des Moines, is the second Democratic presidential debate held at Drake University. We'll get to the debate shortly, but tonight, we're starting with the Republicans because last night in Fort Dodge, Iowa, Donald Trump said a lot of things about a lot of things, but mostly focused on his rival, Ben Carson.
But if you're a child molester, there's no cure. They can't stop you. Pathological, there's no cure. Now, he said he was pathological. Okay. He said he went after his mother with a hammer. He wanted to hit her on the head. Or he hit her on the head, or he wanted to hit her on the head. And I said, wow, that's tough. Man. Did anybody in this audience ever go after your mother to hit her on the head with a hammer? Okay? So he went after his mother. This is in his book. This isn't me. I'm just trying to save you the cost of a book. So he's a pathological, damaged temper, a problem. Then they talk about my tone is a little bit tough. Give me a break.
Trump and Carson are roughly even in the polls nationally and many polls and here in Iowa. And today, Trump kept up the attack on Carson. He released a video on Instagram that plays off the fact that today is Friday the 13th and the movies of the same name. He made Ben Carson look like Willie Horton.
I had a large camping knife and I tried to stab him in the abdomen.
What? Does it fit with the guy who you knew?
No.
Today in Greenville, South Carolina, Carson responded.
It's not the kind of dialogue that I would ever engage in. And I'm hopeful that maybe his advisors will help him to understand the word pathological and recognize that that does not denote incurable. It's not the same. It simply is an adjective that describes something that is highly abnormal. And something that, fortunately, I've been able to be delivered from for a half a century now.
Jennifer, a lot of people nationally seem to like Trump regardless of how outrageous he is. How do you think Iowans will respond to the speech last night attacking Carson in that video?
Well, people were taken aback at the event last night. Our reporter who was there said that people were startled at his negativity. The Carson supporters in Iowa that I've talked to today who have seen both the Instagram and the speech last night have said they don't like the negativity. If there's one thing that they really didn't care for was Trump mocking Carson for going into a bathroom and coming back out a Christian, as if Trump is arguing that you can't have a Christian conversion, that God can't affect people's lives and change them.
In one dramatic moment.
Exactly, in one dramatic moment. So they did not care for that. So if there's anything about that Carson supporters were really offended at, it was that. So it doesn't sound like it's going to hurt Carson with his own supporters, but it might hurt Trump.
What is the history here in Iowa of negative personal attacks like that? Have they worked in the past?
Goodness, this is something that has just jumped the shark as far as attacks like this. I don't think Iowans have ever seen anything quite like this.
Yeah. The other thing about the Trump versus Carson contest, of course, is Carson is strong in a lot of national polls, a clear number 2, and in some cases he's been number 1. But he really does probably have to beat Trump here to get momentum into states that he's not doing as well in New Hampshire, South Carolina, right?
Yeah, exactly. There's almost two races here right now, and it's Trump and Carson, and those two are competing, and one of them needs to win here in order to move on.
Although I think Trump could survive a loss in Iowa probably more easily than Carson.
Probably.
All right, let's watch some more of Trump's speech, the parts where he talked about other candidates and other things besides Ben Carson.
But I'm good at war. I've had a lot of wars of my own. I'm really good at war. I love war in a certain way, but only when we win. I would bomb the shit out of them. I would just bomb those suckers. And that's right. I'd blow up the pipes. I'd blow up the I'd blow up every single inch. Think of Hillary. Every single thing that she touched turned to garbage. The entire Middle East in her reign. And she's playing the woman card up. That's all she has. Honestly, outside of the woman's card, she's got nothing going. Believe me. Rubio, ready? weak on illegal immigration, like weak, like a baby, like a baby. Not a good poker player, because every time he's under pressure, he starts to just profusely sweat. Now, Bush, I said he was a low-energy individual, and it killed his campaign. Who ever heard of that? People said, you know, he's right. But we don't have to talk about Bush, because it looks like he's out, right?
So, Jennifer, that speech in Fort Dodge was almost 24 hours ago, and yet people in politics in Iowa and nationally are still talking about Trump's performance, even though the bar for Trump outrageousness is pretty high. Is that Trump unplugged, or is that Trump falling apart?
That may have been the actual jump from him just being unplugged and kind of speaking randomly and from the cuff to him being a little bit unhinged. That's the reaction we're hearing from Iowans today, who were pretty startled by it. He likes being provocative. He loves being in the news. So, you know, this might have all been a strategy for him to just get out there on Friday the 13th doing something that people are going to call quote unquote scary. But some people actually did find it scary.
Yeah. His ads, of course, are not like that. And while his other recent appearances have always included some barbs, this went a bit further, or a lot further. Your fingertip feel or hunch or reporting on, will Trump keep that up? Will that be the mode between now and January and February?
He switches so much. Like in the debate, he was so subdued and calm and gentlemanly. And the Fort Dodge speech last night was anything but. So I would suspect we'll see him rotating between those two personalities.
Now, we were both in the state but not covering the speech last night. Just tell me about how you first heard of it and sort of what the initial reports you got were.
Just on Twitter. It just tons and tons of tweets with people talking about him unbuckling his belt buckle, which was just a phenom.
Right. The other thing is, obviously, although the Carson attacks have gotten a lot of focus, he is still attacking others. Are there, at this point, Ted Cruz seems to be maybe the biggest threat here, but are there other attacks you heard from Trump last night that you can see a logic to?
Oh, goodness. You know, he still does his repeat attacks on everyone. He keeps dredging them up and keeps hammering at them, and they're effective. So it does seem like each person that he goes after, it tears them down in the polls.
The one thing he did last night, again, that stood out to me was the attacks on Hillary Clinton, because you see with Jeb Bush's new focus and a lot of the other candidates auditioning to say who's the strongest to take on Hillary Clinton, who's got the best frame on her. I thought his attacks on her last night would reinforce for a lot of voters, Trump is strong, Trump is the one who can take her on.
He's manly. I mean, my goodness, he even went so far as to unbuckle his belt to send a manly message. So, right. My goodness.
Right. Okay, up next, our conversations with Debbie Wasserman Schultz, the Democratic National Chair, and the debate moderator for tomorrow night's debate. CBS News' John Dickerson. We'll have more after 60 seconds. Joining Jennifer Jacobs and me now here in the Des Moines Register newsroom is my Bloomberg News colleague, Margaret Talev. Margaret, welcome. We're going to do a preview now, deeper dive on tomorrow's Democratic debate. Starts at 9 Eastern time on CBS. And we're going to start with the front runner, Hillary Clinton. All the candidates pretty much down in the days leading up to the debate preparing. What are you looking for from Hillary Clinton tomorrow during the debate?
Expectations for her are pretty high. She had such an acclaimed performance in the Las Vegas debate that it'll be interesting to see if she can beat that expectations game. And the big question is, will she slip?
Margaret, last time she was pretty aggressive. I thought the biggest surprise of the debate was when Sanders opened the door to an attack, or the moderators did. She went hard. Do you think, based on the fact that she's in a sturdier place now than that debate, that she'll be less prone to attack, or Clinton's philosophy is keep attacking, keep being on the offense?
Well, certainly that's when she's at her best. But also Bernie Sanders knows that he has, this is sort of make or break time. His numbers are changing in the polls even since that last debate, and he cannot afford to fall further behind in Iowa. So he has reason to go after her in a more pointed fashion. Yeah.
So as I said, the candidates have mostly been down since for the last couple of days preparing for the debate. Bernie Sanders' campaign did today release a new television ad, a 30-second ad. He's had a 60-second biographical and issue ad on. This is a 30-second ad that's going to begin to air. The campaign says in Iowa, New Hampshire, starting this weekend.
People are sick and tired of establishment politics, and they want real change.
Bernie Sanders, husband, father, grandfather. He's taking on Wall Street and a corrupt political system that keeps in place a rigged economy. Bernie's campaign is funded by over 1 million contributions. People like you who see the middle class disappearing and want a future to believe in.
I'm Bernie Sanders, and I approve this message.
So, Jennifer, since the last debate, the national narrative, at least, has changed from the notion that Sanders is surging in Iowa, strong position in both Iowa and New Hampshire, to now this thing is over. How are his Iowa supporters feeling on the eve of the debate about holding their ground in the state and advancing?
They want to see him prove that the narrative that the burn is not quite as hot and sizzling as it was in the summer sunshine is not true. They really want to see him pick it up again. It was interesting in that new television ad, he really stresses that anti-establishment. People are sick of the establishment. And one interesting thing was that we had Tom Harkin, one of Hillary Clinton's top surrogates, was going after him saying, why do people think that he's anti-establishment? He's been in elected office 4 years. So that was interesting that he chose in this ad to continue to say, you know, I'm not establishment. Let's go after them.
Margaret, there's some new national polling at CBS New York Times poll says that Democrats think Hillary Clinton is more likely to make change in Washington than Bernie Sanders. To me, he's got to turn that number around. If he can't beat her on that score, he's not going to beat her in Iowa or New Hampshire.
Absolutely. And what do I see in that new ad? Large crowds, which he wants to connote, right. Him smiling, people of color, young people, Wall Street. That's his message. He's got
lots of weaknesses, but also the Wall Street message is one of his few areas of strength. Last candidate on the stage, of course, is Martin O'Malley. One of the huge puzzles for a lot of people is a guy who, whenever we're in Iowa, we see a fair amount of grassroots support from him, decent support at the Jefferson-Jackson dinner, and yet his poll standing never rises much above an asterisk. Is there still time for him, still opening for him to become a player in a contest which, without getting into all the rules, has a 15% threshold at the individual caucuses? So he'll need to advance his support a great deal to break through here.
People, the Democrats I've talked to, said they will be watching in the debate for him to show some sort of an X factor. Can he show that aura of just raw power and charisma that Hillary Clinton has, or can he show that fiery passion that Bernie Sanders has, or what will he step forward and exhibit as his X factor? Will it be charisma? Will it be this hope and optimism theme that he's been leaning on, or will it just be the theme that he knows how to run a big operation like government? But there's got to be some X factor that he really brings forward in this debate.
Right. X factors, as I think, is a good way to describe, but also issues. Is there an issue opening for him in this race in the Democratic electorate in Iowa between Clinton and Sanders?
Education, family values, religion, youth. Any of the above, that he's neither nor, that he's the Joe Biden that Joe Biden decided not to be. Any of those will get into the place where he needs to be, which is not number one and not number two, but just a credible number three at this point.
Right. Saturday night is not the best time to put on an event you want people to watch, and there's a big Iowa football game at a year when Iowa's doing quite well, undefeated. Will Iowans, do you think, pay more attention to this debate because it's in Iowa, or it doesn't really matter where the debate is? They'll pay the same amount of attention as if it were in Las Vegas or Manchester or Columbus?
No, they will. They will definitely pay more attention because it was in Iowa, but maybe and the clips the next day and in the news coverage, because there's a big wrestling tournament here, and both of our big football teams have games on Saturday, so it's definitely maybe not the number one priority for some Iowans.
Right. What do you think? Will this debate be a bigger deal for people here?
It'd be a bigger deal for people here than it is for people outside of here. But the problem is living up to the expectations of the last debate. There's so much drama in the build-up to would Biden run, would he not run, how would Clinton do ahead of Benghazi. And, after her performance in the last debate, it's going to probably take a lot to get people as excited or paying as much attention to sort of that threshold question of can she or can she not. It's a great opportunity for Sanders if she stumbles. It's a great opportunity for O'Malley if he can break through. But a lot of people are beginning to be distracted already.
Right. And, of course, the big focus for everybody will be, does Bernie Sanders find a way to really put an aggressive contrast together, not personal attacks, which he won't do, but a very negative, a very focused contrast between the two candidates. All right, we're going to talk next about a big summit in Florida where a lot of Republican presidential candidates have spoken already, and we'll hear from the debate moderator, John Dickerson, right after this.
How fantastic is it that we have such an array of young, talented, dynamic candidates running for president?
There's some big differences between the Republicans and the Democrats running.
And what a contrast with the Democrats.
None of our candidates are under investigation by the FBI.
They changed the location for the next Democratic debate. They're going to have it at Leavenworth. Well, they wanted to make it easier for Hillary to attend.
We don't have any socialists running in the Republican Party for president.
So now the Democratic field consists of a wild-eyed socialist with ideas that are dangerous for America and the world, and Bernie Sanders.
I'm not sure who brought Barack Obama's teleprompter, but I wish I could move it so I can see you guys.
By the way, what are these? Is Obama coming?
That was the Republican presidential candidates Marco Rubio and Ted Cruz sharing some jokes at the Sunshine Summit today in Orlando, Florida, where a lot of the candidates spoke. Joining us from Washington, our Washington Bureau now, are two people whose bylines you can find today on BloombergPolitics.com, covering the presidential campaign, Sahil Kapoor and Kevin Cirilli. Gentlemen, welcome. Sahil, let me start with you and ask you about something we've been talking about for the last 2 days, which is this conflict between Senator Cruz and Senator Rubio on immigration. Senator Rubio and his team have been making the claim that there's, in fact, a record on Ted Cruz's part of having supported a path to legal status for those here illegally. The Cruz campaign denies it. What is the truth on that?
Mark, I actually spent the day reporting on this, and what happened was in 2013, during the Senate immigration debate, Ted Cruz filed an amendment in committee that would have stripped out the path to citizenship from that bill. It would have kept every other component of that bill, including provisional legal status for people who are here illegally. He made a point to say that several times, that it would only strip out the path to citizenship but nothing else. What the Rubio campaign did was it interpreted that and said that means Ted Cruz supports the path to legalization, which Ted Cruz's campaign, and I should add other supporters who were following the debate very closely, including some people inside the Senate themselves, said that that wasn't the case. He didn't actually support legal status. He said this was a legislative tactic, or they said this was a legislative tactic on his part to try to poison the bill, to try to make it unpalatable to Democrats. And the proof of that there is that two very hardline immigration restrictionists named Jeff Sessions and Mike Lee, senators, also voted for Cruz's amendment. No one has accused them of being in favor of legal status. So that's really where things are right now.
So is this a case of he said, or is the Rubio campaign simply made something up, exploiting the difficulty of always understanding Senate procedure and Senate strategy?
Mark, it's not entirely a question of made something up, right? There's a grain of truth there, but this is, they are taking a grain of truth and creating something more out of it than arguably there is on this one.
Right. So Ted Cruz released details of an immigration plan today. Is that a coincidence, or is that long planned, or is this something he's doing to try to push back a little more and say, here's my tough plan to deal with illegal immigration?
I'd heard that he was planning on releasing it in the coming days or perhaps over the next week or so, and I have to believe the timing of this, was not entirely a coincidence. He dropped this plan. He creates this sort of exactly the contrast he wants with Marco Rubio, who supported expanding legal immigration, who has a record of supporting a path to citizenship, even though he now qualifies that in very important and very significant ways. Ted Cruz's plan today is dramatically in the other direction. He cuts legal immigration in a big way. He cracks down on H-1B visas. He calls for ending birthright citizenship. He talks about a border wall. A lot of the proposals that Donald Trump put out in August, I should add. And like Donald Trump, he consulted with Jeff Sessions, the Senate's leading restrictionist on immigration. So I don't think it's a contrast. I think it was very deliberate to try to I don't think it was a coincidence. This was a very deliberate attempt by Ted Cruz to draw the contrast with Rubio that he wants in this primary.
Okay, so thanks. Let's move on to our colleague Kevin Cirilli and talk about Ben Carson. A fair amount of news with him earlier in the day. Earlier in the show, we talked about the conflict he's having with Donald Trump, and we saw his reaction. What is the campaign saying behind the scenes, Kevin, about whether they want to have a fight with Trump on these issues?
Behind the scenes, Mark, the campaign is really being tight-lipped. Earlier today, Dr. Carson addressed the controversy to reporters, and he said that, of course, this was not something that he wanted to engage in. Now, his advisors are saying that they would like to see folks praying for Mr. Trump, that this is not the kind of political attacks that they want to engage in. Politically speaking, though, Mark, this plays right into the narrative that the Carson campaign would like to put out there, and that is they are, politically speaking, turning the other cheek and really highlighting Dr. Carson's faith, really trying to portray him as someone who is not going to engage in the typical types of attacks that we see. It kind of is reminiscent of what happened in the 2008 cycle when the Clinton supporters kept trying to go after then Senator Obama, and it really almost strengthened Senator Obama. And on the New York Times bestsellers list, we're seeing that Dr. Carson's book is even outselling Cripple America, the book by Donald Trump.
Kevin, another story you have up on the website is about someone who most people won't have heard of, but a pretty important person in Dr. Carson's life, stepping back at least somewhat from the campaign. Tell us about that guy and the significance of that move.
Well, Terry Giles is a Texas multi-millionaire businessman and someone who has known Dr. Carson for decades. They are very close confidants, and he was actually the chairman of the exploratory committee for Dr. Carson's campaign. Now, there were some concerns behind the scenes, and I spoke with a top Carson campaign advisor, as well as a source extremely familiar with the discussions, that Mr. Giles was not familiar with the FEC violations, and that he was going back and forth between the super PAC and the campaign, as well as making public comments that really ruffled a lot of feathers behind the scenes internally in the campaign. They've shut him out. He's no longer an advisor to the campaign, but they do say, however, that he maintains a close friendship with Dr. Carson. It comes one day, mind you, after the campaign publicly stood by Al Costa, who was a Pittsburgh businessman who has business with the Carsons and was convicted of fraudulent dealings, $40,000 worth for insurance companies in Pittsburgh area.
Okay, Kevin, thanks very much. Lots of news with Dr. Carson today, even on this day where we're previewing the Democratic debate. Kevin, thank you. Thanks to Sahil. This is a busy day on news. We're going to talk, when we come back, more about the Democratic debate from the point of view not so much nationally, but of Iowa. We'll be joined by Kathie Obradovich, and Jennifer Jacobs will rejoin us. We're also going to look at the poll situation here in Iowa. What would it mean for Bernie Sanders to be able to win this state? There's a clear surge on the part of confidence on the Clinton side, but the Sanders folks who we met with earlier today still believe that they have the capacity to draw big crowds. Expect Bernie Sanders to spend a lot of time here in January trying to come back, at least in the terms of perception, and his buildup here in terms of staff is rivaling Hillary Clinton. So the Democratic race is not over by any means, and the debate tomorrow is going to get people to focus more back on the Democratic contest, which has taken a back seat now for several weeks because of the Republican field and the Donald Trump factor. When we come back, we'll be joined with our discussion with the debate moderator, the main debate moderator tomorrow, John Dickerson of CBS News, right after this. The debate moderators in the presidential debates have come under some scrutiny and for some criticism of late, so we were delighted when we sat down this afternoon with John Dickerson of CBS News, who will be at the helm tomorrow night, and found him to be in his normal serene and loose self. We started by chatting about what he's looking forward to tomorrow night. What's the point of the debates?
It's a good question. So the point of the debates are to illuminate their positions, but also differentiation. I mean, they can put out press releases and give speeches, and they have their website full of stuff. But it's a chance to say, I'm better than my opponent on this issue, better than that opponent on that issue. And the issues aren't just policy. It's how they would behave as president. You know, when I'm faced with this choice, I'll be better able to handle it than the other person.
You're a student of history and of the history of journalism. What's it like to do this as compared to doing Face or doing other media you do?
The tough part is thinking about the others on the stage being there, you know, but it's also a benefit because you can say, okay, well, how would the other two hear that? And then what would the follow-up be to that other person? The more moving parts. So, you know, having started in print, the interview can wind and you can spend the day with them. This is much more like Face, where you've got a limited amount of time. You want to go in a sequence that makes sense. You can't double back. And you know when you follow up, you want to get into it, but also you know that the more you follow up, the more you burn time that might be used on a question that could come later. Yeah. It's obviously there's some pressure on you as well as the other people on the stage, particularly because some of the previous moderators have gotten a lot of heat. Are you impervious to pressure? No, gosh, no, I wish. The biggest pressure for me is if we don't get at something. Like, you have this incredible opportunity. These three are on stage. They are there and they can engage. We've seen what a real debate looks like. There are really big issues out there. I mean, there are people, those volunteers that you've been talking to, that are in this for their heart and soul. And to have a debate that just runs through the talking points and doesn't deliver any better understanding of politics and the choices at the time that's the thing that I feel the most pressure about.
No disrespect to Mr. Chafee and Mr. Webb, but going from 5 to 3, probably more attractive to you and probably better experience for the viewers, right?
I think so, because you get a real conversation about the real choice so far in the debate, and Webb and Chafee did some interesting things that we've seen. Remember in 2008, Joe Biden was really far back in the polls, but he sharpened some points. So the people who are not doing well in the polls can sharpen the conversation, but in the end, the voters want to hear from the people who are kind of at the top and are likely to follow on and go all the way through.
When candidates go into major media appearances, debates, or interviews, they'll often talk to their staff about what they want the headline to be. What does John Dickerson want the headline to be out of this debate?
I would love the headline to be about the candidates, not about me.
That's a good, lofty, and correct goal. Good luck.
So.
Break a leg, as they say in the television business. Thank you. Joining us now, one of the people who will be on the stage asking the questions tomorrow night with John Dickerson, Kathie Obradovich of the Des Moines Register, who's also impervious to pressure, just like John. I'm not going to ask you what your questions are, but what are Iowa issues, do you think, that could get attention tomorrow night, either questions or answers that maybe national voters aren't as engaged in?
Yeah, this is a national debate, and so, we don't want to just ask questions about Iowa. But there are a lot of issues that resonate in Iowa. Immigration, for example, that is something that people wouldn't think of when they think of Iowa, but it's a big issue here because of the meatpacking. The environment, there's a lot of trade-offs when you talk about environmental issues. This is a low-wage state, so issues of wage stagnation, which the Democrats are talking about all around the country, have a real effect here. So there's a lot of issues that I think we can put an Iowa spin on, but they're going to have national resonance.
I mean, what I have always struggled with is when I watch these debates, I want to see the candidates' personalities come through, and the format tends to be so stilted that it's really hard to see that. We saw a little bit of it in the last time around where Bernie Sanders, made the joke, the Hillary Clinton joke that sort of livened things up, right? But I wonder if you thought about that as well. Like, if only you could give these guys like 2 or 3 drinks and put them in a cozy chair by a fire and let
Bernie
them
Sanders
be, right?
Do his Bernie Sanders as Larry David as Bernie Sanders impression live in the debate.
I think the candidates have to bring that themselves. It's sort of like the candidate on candidate attacks, for example. You can give them the opportunity to do that, but they have to want to do that. You can't force that kind of thing. This is the second debate. They may feel a little looser and more comfortable than they were in the first debate. So maybe we'll get some more of that, less rehearsed interaction.
Do you think it matters? Do you think that's important, as important as issues are?
In Iowa, it matters a lot, but we have a lot of opportunities to see these candidates, and see what their personalities are like up close. But I do think that is something that the national viewers want to see. One of the things I thought Bernie Sanders could do better is talk a little bit more about himself, about his life, humanize himself a little bit. He never does that.
It was reported today that you all met with the campaigns. Were you involved with that?
I was not involved in that.
What do you think Iowans will be doing tomorrow night at 9 o'clock, 8 o'clock Central Time? Will they be watching and talking about football, or do you think there'll be a lot of people watching this debate in full?
There a lot of debates. A lot of these debates have had huge viewership, despite the fact that for the first Democratic debate, the playoffs were going on, right? So I do think that people who are really interested are going to take the time, even if they're going to turn the channel to check the score in between the questions.
Thank goodness you're impervious to pressure. Kathie, good luck tomorrow night. We'll all obviously be watching.
Thank you very much.
When we come back, we're going to talk polling with Ann Selzer right after this. Wouldn't be a show from Iowa about Iowa without the inclusion of the real Ann Selzer, our polling practitioner. Ann, thanks for joining us.
My pleasure.
So we're talking a lot about Bernie Sanders and whether this is still doable for him. Could he win Iowa?
Right.
What can you tell us now about where Sanders stands and what that says about the possibility that he could finish first in February?
You know, every time I look at his poll numbers, I come away more impressed that he has an opportunity to win. Just looking at the numbers on paper. Clinton has a lead by 7 points in our last October poll, but he leads. That means he makes up that gap and then gets up to 20 points higher among some key groups. He does that with independents. He does that with people under 45. He does it with people who have not been to a caucus before. That is a trilogy that propelled Barack Obama to victory in 2008. So it's worth paying attention to that he does that well with those groups.
Is the fact that he draws bigger crowds, not just nationally, but when he's here, sometimes side-by-side comparison, not exact, but he'll be in one place and then Secretary Clinton will have been there or be there shortly after. Do those big crowds translate into anything historically?
It could translate into something historically. Barack Obama drew huge crowds as well, and people may feel that Hillary Clinton, they've already been there. They've seen what that is. So there is sort of that juice that he's bringing to this that I think is getting people excited about caucusing when they haven't done so before.
Jennifer, if you look at the candidate visits, they often tell you something about what their strategy is. How have Sanders and Clinton compared in terms of where they've gone, bigger cities versus more rural areas?
Yeah, they do tend to stick to the more metropolitan areas, but actually they've gotten pretty well, all around the eastern part of the state. And Iowa City and the Johnson County area are considered a pretty good area for Bernie Sanders.
Yeah. So demographically and geographically, if Sanders is to win, the groups you mentioned, he needs to do better with young people. He needs to do better than she does with first-time caucus goers. What about geographically? Is there any division between eastern and western or areas around Des Moines where he needs to excel?
He is doing better in the 2nd Congressional District, so that's northeast Iowa, and there are a lot of little small college towns up there, and so that's there. I think the group that's going to be key are independents. And I went back and looked at October 2007, so 8 years difference from when we did this poll. Hillary Clinton led by the exact same margin over Barack Obama, then she is leading over Bernie Sanders now. The one group where Obama did better substantially was with independents, and he parlayed that into bringing in new people. And I think if you think about one group to pay attention to, it's people who consider themselves independent.
And what about the gender differences? Is he doing better with men now?
He is
doing better with women?
That's exactly right, as you would expect to have happen. If and which way tilts it? Maybe because she's doing better with women, then he does
Well, would
better.
you automatically expect that the woman's going to do better with women? She's in some ways more conservative. You might argue that men are sometimes going to be more conservative and Democratic side than women. So is it a foregone conclusion that she's going to win women?
Not necessarily. I think that's a really good point. I think what you do have and what I hear is women saying, I want to see a woman in my lifetime. And so her supporters tend to be older because Sanders are younger, so you might have a little bit of that history going for it.
Does it matter that he is not doing as well, nationally he's not doing as well with minority voters? She does much better with African American voters. Does that matter in Iowa?
In Iowa, it matters less, just because there's not as much of that minority population to move things. He does much better with people who describe themselves as liberals. And so that's new, because 8 years ago, we didn't have a very big group saying they consider themselves liberal. He has ignited that part of the party, and I think that's what's happening in bringing new people out.
But the youth turnout and the college turnout really is tricky. I mean, Obama, of course, was much younger than Bernie Sanders was. Do you think that makes a difference in terms of the ultimate turnout?
I don't think that matters in terms of the college turnout. I think it matters that you'll have clusters of places where he might do well, and he needs a statewide organization.
And of course, the polls are going to probably change. There'll be some energy and dynamic between now and February. But as currently, in short, this race is not over in Iowa.
As you look at it on paper, it is not over in Iowa.
Okay. Ann Selzer, thank you very much. Up next, see what the Democratic campaigns look like from through the eyes of the people who work on them after this. We spent a part of our day here in Des Moines hanging out with the people who make the campaigns run, the volunteers. Have a look. There are a lot of people working on the campaign who, either they're Iowans or not, first time ever. So what do you tell them about how this works and what it's like to work on a campaign here?
It's very exciting. There's lots of opportunities of meeting other Iowans who have like ideas, and what I like is the different ideas everybody brings to the table.
So you've been door knocking for Martin O'Malley, right?
I have.
How many doors have you knocked on so far, do you think?
Oh, maybe 250. Is that be about right, Jordan?
More than that.
Do people close the door in your face a lot? I don't want to talk to you? Or?
I won't say a lot, but occasionally that happens. Sometimes I've walked up to folks, and one guy said last weekend, unless you're here to rake leaves, I don't even want to talk to you.
I happen to like phoning, so I do phone calls, and then I've been hosting monthly house parties, which is something different from what I've ever done before, but partly because just to help people know Hillary's record.
You could be doing lots of other stuff with your time over the years, but for Hillary now, why volunteer as opposed to do something else?
Being a part of this is a really important thing, and it's as a volunteer we have the responsibility to be engaged and fully participate, and so I mean I can't imagine doing anything else.
Underreported fact, Bernie Sanders' headquarters is next to a Hy-Vee. That's like the classic Iowa supermarket. First of all, they have great Chinese food, but you can get anything in there. The fact that the headquarters people can go right over there, get to the Hy-Vee and buy anything, huge advantage that the other campaigns apparently are underestimating. So explain to people what FIELD is who don't know.
FIELD is identifying Bernie supporters and mobilizing those Bernie supporters into volunteers.
Do the volunteers from the competing Democratic primary campaigns or caucus campaigns know each other? Do you intermingle? Are there like sort of volunteer wars?
Yeah. Well, one of our best phone bankers, his name's Charlie. He came in and he was making phone calls and he was doing the normal pitch. Hi, my name's Charlie. I'm calling with the Bernie Sanders campaign. And then his phone rang. He was using a campaign phone. And then his personal cell phone rang and he got a call from the Clinton campaign while he was phone banking for Hillary. So the worlds unite.
Incredible amount of idealism and hard work is part of what makes the Iowa caucuses work and make it a great thing for the country and for Iowa. We also spoke, Margaret, Talev, and I, to the Democratic National Chairwoman, Debbie Wasserman Schultz, and the party's Iowa Chairwoman, Dr. Andy McGuire. And we started with a little talk about the power of campaign volunteers.
I started as a volunteer. You know, from the first time I got involved in politics, I was a volunteer on campaigns. Then did internships, and you really cut your teeth politically in those real beginning efforts. And some people spend their entire involvement in politics as a volunteer, and others go on and get really motivated and decide to run, or they join a staff if they're really good. We recruit them and turn them from volunteers into campaign staff, and then that's how they become the seasoned veterans that help a lot of these campaigns be successful.
You talk a lot about the divisions within the Republican Party, and right now there clearly are a lot. Your candidates agree on a lot of things.
Yeah.
So what's the point of the debates?
Well, I think the point of the debates are, for us, where you have three candidates that really share the same goals. How are we going to make sure that we can build on the successes that we've had under President Obama's presidency, 68 straight months of job growth in the private sector, more than 13 million jobs created, cutting the deficits by 2/3, 17 million people who now have health insurance that didn't before. We rescued the American automobile industry, created more manufacturing jobs. And how are we going to build on that success? We have in our debates really more of a differentiation between the candidates on the approach that they would take to achieving those same goals.
What's an example of that you see?
It's a little hard to pinpoint. I think Bernie Sanders' approach compared to both Martin O'Malley and Hillary Clinton would probably be more, for lack of a better term, he might lean on the mechanics of government a little bit more than the other two would, where they would maybe lean more on a mix of government and the private sector.
Since he's a socialist, that's not a crazy thing.
Well, I think he remains true to his philosophy, certainly.
Our politics have somewhat become nationalized. You can be an Iowan and watch politics on social media. You can watch it on cable TV. Does it matter that there's a debate in Iowa?
Does to Iowans. We love to have them here, but I think this is sort of
like it is with the caucuses, that we get to talk to them and ask them questions and see how they react personally, and that's what we get to do with the caucuses here. So we love having them in town, and then they do a lot of events around it, so that's always good too. But that's what's so special about our caucuses, is having that one-on-one question-answer, look them in the eye, shake their hand type of feel with the caucuses.
And Joe Biden is not running
He
now,
is not.
so we know that. So do you expect that to have any kind of impact in this debate coming up? Are you seeing it on the ground in Iowa in terms of how people are engaging and how much up in the air this sort of pre-caucus contest still is?
Well, I think it sort of turns some people loose. There are some very loyal Biden people in Iowa, and they were definitely holding on. And once he made his decision, then I think they could look at the other candidates more fully. So I think that's helped kind of to release them, if you will.
Do you think it makes a difference in the general election, looking ahead, who the Republican nominee is? Is it tougher for Democrats in Florida if it's a nominee Rubio or a nominee Bush, or you think it makes no difference at this point?
I really don't think it makes any difference, because each of the Republican candidates, I actually think it's the positions that Jeb Bush and Marco Rubio are taking are even worse for them in Florida, because they should know better. You know, usually you have candidates that are smart enough to at least be a little bit parochial and think about the makeup of the states that they're from or the district that you represent, and you try to do something to protect the folks that you represent and that you know best. And these two have done the opposite. I mean, Marco Rubio's position, pinning him down on where he actually is on immigration reform is like trying to nail Jell-O to a wall. This week he said that he absolutely would repeal the president's Deferred Action Program to protect Dreamers from being deported out of the country. He also said that his economic plan, which is really just a retread of the Ryan plan, would end Medicare as we know it and turn it into a voucher system. And he thinks it's perfectly fine. That he doesn't mean the people who get Medicare now. What he means is the people who come after him, after this generation of retirees. Well, that's unacceptable to people who are about to retire and to people who believe that there should be a retirement safety net through which we don't allow people to fall.
Some people are saying now that this Democratic nomination fight is done. Hillary Clinton is inevitable. Do you agree with that?
You know, we haven't had anyone vote yet, so we certainly can't be pronouncing a winner until folks in Iowa have a chance to caucus, till our primaries actually occur. So we are in the process of, both of us, managing our primary nominating contest and doing so in a neutral way, and we're going to give people an opportunity to vote.
Is this race over?
No. I mean, you know the snapshot in time, and the snapshot on February 1st could be very different than the snapshot right now. So, and it's all about that organization and how they do in the next 80 days. So, no, it's not over.
You're not doing the best job hiding your glee over the food fight in the Republican Party. You occasionally drop your poker face on that. As a citizen, as a parent, as someone who wants civil discourse, how do you feel about Donald Trump's prominent role in this presidential race?
You know, I think everything about Donald Trump troubles me as a parent, as a legislator, as a citizen. I think that he has really cheapened the political discourse in this country, and he's playing to some of the worst of people's base instincts and driving people towards hatred. And, you know, presidential campaigns are supposed to be about hope, and they're supposed to be about the promise of the future. And I want to take a shower after I listen to Donald Trump talk.
Joined now by our colleague Jennifer Epstein, who covers Hillary Clinton's campaign, talking there about volunteers. I've been struck by the intensity, the number, the variety of people, young people she has in this state in particular, but also older people in Iowans. How pleased are they with their ground operation at this point?
You know, I think that they're extremely pleased. They know that the Sanders campaign also has a very strong operation here, and that the O'Malley campaign is doing its part. But they've been on the ground here since April, and they believe that they have what it takes to win, and that when it comes to caucus day, they'll be able to turn on their machine and get it rolling and get people in there to actually speak up for Hillary Clinton and put her over the edge.
And quickly, the Iowa operation gets attention from the highest levels of the campaign, doesn't it?
It does quite a lot. You know, Robbie Muck, the campaign manager, Marlon Marshall, his kind of top deputy, they're very aware of the day-to-day happenings here and how the volunteer contacts are going and all of that. And that's going to continue to be the case even more so. And I think we'll be seeing a lot of Secretary Clinton in Iowa, even more than we already have.
Okay, Jennifer, thank you very much. Our thanks to the two chairwomen for talking to us and the volunteers for working so hard and to talking to us, and we'll be right back. A big thanks to the folks here at the Des Moines Register, including Jennifer Jacobs, for hosting us yet again, our partners all the way through February in the Iowa caucuses. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next week after the debate. Good evening.